Hey, well, good morning, everybody. So happy to have Dan Swift with us this morning. Just a little bit about Dan before we hand it over to him, let him run the show. Dan launched LinkedIn's social selling platform line in 2012, LinkedIn Sales Solutions, and brought LinkedIn Sales Navigator to market, which I know is something all of us are familiar with. And Navigator is now a billion-dollar product line. According to his bio, my guess is it's even bigger than that for LinkedIn. It's used by most of the world's most successful B2B companies. And then in 2018, after watching organizations buy sales technology but lag in adoption and even still miss their revenue targets, Dan launched Numentum, which is a buyer experience consultancy built for the digital era, and devised something called the Numentum Activation Index, which I know he's going to tell us about, which is a simple, highly effective measure of the company's human capital engagement on LinkedIn. And Numentum has helped leading global enterprises like Vodafone Business, SAP, Broadcom, Relics Equipment, and help them inspire the go-to-market teams. Just like I know he's going to inspire you guys today. So Dan's going to lead an interactive discussion. We told him the Sammy folks have a lot of opinions, a lot of questions. So light up that chat, fire out your questions. Dan's going to keep an eye on it. Rob and I will also keep an eye on it and make sure this is a Sammy level discussion this morning. So without any further ado, Dan, over to you.
I love it. Thank you so much. All right. So I was asked to come in and chat with you about 5 things that sales leaders don't want marketers to know. Now, you'll be pleased to know from the get-go that there are not a lot of slides. This is purely to guide the conversation, keep it super interactive, but keep us on point as well. Now, just a little bit more on my background to set the scene. So I started my career in England, and I spent the first 12 years of my career selling data and information to compliance and risk professionals. So if you can do that when you work for a company that was not the market leader and do it successfully, you can probably do pretty well in sales. Then I went over to LinkedIn, as we just heard from Pam, spent 3 years there, and then joined Sprinkler. So this audience may know Sprinkler as a social media management tech company, right? Spent 3 years there and then launched Numentum, as we heard 5 years ago. So a couple of things just to also share with you. So outside of work, this is my crew. I think it's kind of funny when you talk about social media, right? This is my social media family, but this is real life. I've got 3 kids under 8. They're all getting ready for school at the moment. We're deciding what we're going to be for Halloween this year. The vote at the moment is we're going to be ninjas, which I'm not totally sure where that came from. But yeah, so ninjas this Halloween. And the Numentum side of things, I think that the call out here is every single day we chat with CEOs, chief marketing officers, chief revenue officers, chief sales officers, folks in sales ops, sales enablement, across the board. And the 5 things I'm going to share with you candidly are the things that they've shared with us in pretty much candor when they become customers as to why they became customers. Okay. So without further ado, the number one thing. Now, I'd love to ask a question off the bat here. Do we have any sales leaders on the call today? We got one, Mark. Anyone else? All right. So let me frame this up, Mark. And I don't know whether you want to get vulnerable with us today or not, but let me frame it up as to what we're hearing. So when you think about what we've gone through in the last 4 years, there is not a playbook for the current state of where we are. There just is not. We've had a global pandemic, right? We've gone through all of the working from home, back to work, hybrid, all of that going on. We've got a macroeconomic environment we're in. And this year, I don't know about you folks, but it's been a very bizarre year. When it comes to buyer behavior, I chatted with a CRO 2 weeks ago, and he shared with me that he's gotten involved in more deals, and the way in which buyers behave is a little erratic, where the best sales leaders will set the next step, agree with the buyer the right time to get back together. And then what he shared with me is that buyers are just now ghosting salespeople, even when there's a next step established. And then randomly showing up 2 months down the line and saying, we're ready to order, after ignoring all communication in that 2-month window. Now, I say there's no, sales leaders don't want to show vulnerability. Think about when sales leaders come into an organization, right? In their interview process, I've got my playbook. My playbook has allowed me to IPO 3 times. My playbook has achieved this kind of growth. But that playbook, candidly, really needs to be rewritten because there is not a playbook for the current world. But the challenge is that's what we as sales leaders hang our hat on, right? Our playbook. That's what we've done for years. Now, the average tenure for a CRO today, anyone want to have a guess as to what that is? Mark, do you know what it is?
I'm going to say it's less than a year.
Anyone else?
I would say less than 2.
It's 2 years. The average tenure across all industries is 2 years, 8 quarters. So you think about what happens with organizations, right? The CRO will come in, the good ones will observe for 90 days. The less good ones will come in and try and stamp their mark on everything and roll out the playbook that doesn't work. Then they'll start getting more involved in the business. So you're in Q2, Q3, Q4, and they'll know by that point, candidly, as to whether or not this is going to work out or not. And at that point, they might start looking for the next gig. So you're really looking at a 3 or 4 quarter experience on average. So Mark, you're pretty bang on in terms of the actual efficiency of the time there. So leaders don't want to show vulnerability. Now that creates a challenge when it comes to partnership internally, right? That's what we have as sales leaders, and our marketing counterparts expect a playbook to be in place of some description, right? That you can collaborate on and work together. The sales leader doesn't necessarily want to put their hands in the air and say, you know what, I've got 70% of what I think is going to work. I need help with the 30%. How can we work together to fix that 30%? Why? 2 things. Vulnerability, fear of losing relevance. That's what we've heard over and over and over and over again. And then fear of learning how to learn again. Most sales leaders have not necessarily had to learn anything particularly new outside of tech that's coming into the organization. Let's be honest, we're not always using that ourselves as sales leaders. Haven't really had to learn anything fundamentally new for a long time. So I'll pause. Mark, what do you say there, my friend?
Yes. You know, I mean, I don't disagree with anything you've said. The whole notion of learning something new and not wanting to admit that you don't know something, it really has to do with the security of the professional you're working with. There's always been a tension between sales and marketing, and who takes credit for the success. So, I've always seen that within organizations, and I know where I'm really weak, and I'm very open to learn, and I want to learn. I've never had that fear, but I can smell it, I can see it in people that I work with. So,
and it's corrosive as well. I've worked at organizations before where I've not been the CRO, but I've worked for them, and they've come into the organization with their crew, right, from previous organizations, and they haven't stopped to slow down to just see even what has worked before, and they just come in and execute. And the best sales leaders come in and seek to understand, but they are so few of those folks nowadays. It's kind of frustrating.
Yeah. Hey, Dan, I'd like to this is a huge topic, and I think there's and would love your opinion on this part. Not only, okay, so 2 years, that's tough. Once they leave, you've got a gap, but they're also doing something else. The new guy or the new gal coming in is not going to even look at the previous playbook, no matter how good it is. They're going to throw it away, which is going to turn the marketing team on its head. And so once that person leaves, you've got maybe 6 months before you can even get back up to speed. What are you seeing? Is vulnerability another reason? What if I use the existing playbook, I look weak? Is that a vulnerability?
If they're, I'm not sure about that. I think if they're not familiar with it, right, then they go to what they're naturally familiar with versus, well, my predecessor brought this in for a reason. Let's at least try and figure out what value it's bringing. I've got 200 people in my go-to-market organization that have worked on this for, let's say, 2 years. Ripping it out, what damage will that do, and what disruption will that bring to all of the operating rhythms internally, as well as obviously the biggest thing, which is pipeline. What kind of disruption is that going to bring? Yet they still come in and put in the playbook that's worked at previous firms. Mind blown.
So can I offer the counterpoint?
Yes, please.
So you blew up sales failed, the playbook failed. We brought in new leadership. A big part of sales is execution. Maybe a primary part of sales if we look at marketing's relationship with sales. So they weren't executing. So a new team comes in, they hit the ground running, they try to ram their model down everybody's throats. And a lot of times it works because the old organization was thrashing and that's why they're replaced. I also don't run into many salespeople who are skilled at organizational transitions. So, asking somebody to come in and do a diagnostic about the old model, sales guys, are to a certain extent coin operated, what makes money. And, I think there's a bias to change. So, yes, I would love thoughtful sales leaders. I just, I'm not sure I'm expecting that, but that's a counterpoint. Sorry.
I love that, Will. I love that. And it's, I don't think it's even as an extensive as a diagnostic. I think it's a sales leader coming in, being naturally curious, wanting to talk not just with his or her peers, but going down a couple of levels, and understanding, what is currently working from the top performers. What are they doing? We're seeing so often that doesn't even take place, which is a little concerning. But again, this is only one in terms of the topic, linking it to sales and marketing alignment. If the sales leader is not prepared to admit that maybe they don't have all the answers, that's a problem. That is a problem. How about this one? Will, I'm going to bring you back in. So
you don't want me to start talking.
let me frame it up a little bit for you, and then I'm going to see what you think on this one. So does anyone on today's call feel as though they are 100% covered when it comes to top of funnel? No issue, complete pipeline coverage for the number that they've been given by the board, the PFO, whoever it is. No issue at all. Does anyone feel super comfortable? Okay. The challenge that I think we've got right now is a lot of sales leaders, and I'm not talking about the folks who are first-time leaders who have come into a frontline manager role and maybe just were selling as recently as 6 months ago. I'm talking to established CROs, 20 years experience, who haven't sold themselves for 2 decades. I'm talking about that kind of individual. Now, if they knew how to prospect and knew how to do it effectively, then we wouldn't be in a place where we are today with the kind of activities that are taking place and the kind of conversion rates from them. So, for example, we're a buyer experience consultancy. We teach buyers how people want to be engaged and sold to. I don't know about you all, but I am inundated every single day with emails, and emails that half of them don't make any sense. I am not in commercial real estate. I never have been. So I'm not interested in a commercial real estate solution. I'm sorry. My name is not Will. My name is Dan. My name is not bracket, name, bracket. I mean, it is mind-blowing what is coming into my inbox every day. But it's not just that. It's the calls, the voicemails that I never check. It's the LinkedIn messages that make no sense. It is now, if sales leaders knew how to prospect effectively, that wouldn't be allowed. But what's happened, in my opinion, and from talking to other folks, is that we've got to this place in the market, and I can't wait for the discussion off the back of this, a motive statement coming up, where what are we doing with the SDR model? What is that all about? So we're hiring, when money was cheap, a ton of people who are 23, 24 years old. We're putting all of our hopes, dreams, and aspirations on their shoulders to secure meetings with economic buyers who are our ages. And they're blasting them with messages that don't make a lot of sense. And then we're scratching our heads saying, why? Well, we've got a pipeline problem. And then we've also got to a point where account executives were too busy to prospect. Oh, no. We're involved in the execution of deals. Oh, no. We've got an SDR who does all of that. That's not us. What are we doing? Anyone got a highly functional SDR organization that is integrated with the AEs, where pipeline is not a problem and everything's working brilliantly?
It doesn't have a massive amount of churn.
That's the other thing. Yeah. And
no. I mean, I would argue that the pipeline, as we look at it, is evolved beyond traditional marketing. I may as well unplug my phone if I'm corporate, because I'm just going to delete every voicemail when it fills up, and I'm going to ignore 90% of the email. And as a person who does a lot of marketing, that doesn't leave me a lot of arrows. And then everybody tells me product-led marketing, so everything needs to be free. And everybody's my customer, because just the paying ones will convert. I mean, I look at this and I think we're upside down.
We've got one where if I had $1 for every sales leader who said, we don't get quality leads from marketing, what does that even mean? It's just nonsensical, some of the stuff that is that we hear. Riddle me this as well. If the SDR function is what it is, and we've hired all of these people, I don't think it's fair on the individual. Like, it is the hardest job, and you have to be so resilient to show up and do what some of these organizations are asking them to do, which actually is not achievable anyway, which is send 100 messages and cadence and sequences and 50 calls, and also do your LinkedIn messaging, and also do all the reporting in CRM. It's rather than do that, I think companies should start looking at the SDR function and saying, okay, we're done with that in terms of outbound. We'll keep a little bit of it for inbound and processing leads to qualify and push them into this. A's now have to take accountability and go back to the good old days where they actually prospect, and that's what we pay them a salary to do. And then for the SDR function, let's have companies that are selling into the lower mid-market, mid-market, maybe the low enterprise segment, and have them do full sales cycle selling, and let's invest in them and let's teach them how to do it, so then they can progress into enterprise sales roles if that's what they even want to do. But it's just not. It's economically. It's not an economically sound model. It's not fair on the individual, and we're all scratching our heads as to, well, we've got a pipeline problem. What are we doing? I'm going to stop ranting. It's only Thursday. It's not Friday. Anyone got any comments on that? I see.
Yeah, Dan, I'd like to jump in. Michael Phelan with Go to Market Pros. How you doing? This is very interesting to me, because I'm in the midst of a major study where I'm interviewing 100 top leaders in sales enablement, sales ops, and sales training. Around what's happening and what's gone wrong, and I think there's a couple of things we've found out in this process. One is that all of the attention right now of the sales leaders is focused on the last 3 or 4% of the pipeline. All of their coaching, they only get involved with reps that have deals, and they only get involved in deals. So there's a catastrophic collapse in mid-funnel and in upper stage funnel. And the second thing we've found out that's going on is there's no value exchange with these BDRs. They're not offering enough value to the buyers. The buyers actually are pulling back and taking, I think only 27% of reps now are hitting quota in the US, but in the first half. So there's but change, and sales leaders are not coming forward with a programmatic view and programs. For example, they're buying to bridge performance gaps versus their best-in-class peers.
Mhm.
That's a very scalable concept, but they're not reaching out, understanding what that gap is, and helping the customer understand the gap and bridge it. So I think it's a catastrophic leadership issue where they're focused on the wrong thing, and they're over managing a couple of weak deals, and they're not offering programs for these reps to get meetings. They don't even understand how the reps get meetings. Neither do marketing people, by the way. When I talk to marketing people about how'd you get your last 100 meetings, most marketing people don't understand that either. So I think there needs to be a programmatic approach, and I think they need to focus on the mid-funnel much more than they are just the last few deals going through. Does that make sense?
It makes more than sense, Michael. You nailed it, my friend. I can't wait. Is the research out, or is it the work that you've just done?
It's research that I'm doing for. I'm doing it for a client, so it's private research. However, I believe they will be publishing it.
Amazing. I'll look out for that.
Hey,
Yes.
Dan,
Yeah.
It's Mike Smith of Lockton. I think we all agree that the old model, or whatever the model is we're using right now, isn't working, right? Email, deleted voicemail, what have you. So what is working effectively?
It's funny you should ask. We'll come back to this, Mike.
That was not a plant, by the way.
No, I was going to say, thank you, Mike. The check is in the mail. No, it's just to round out on that real quick. What's happened before we go to what I think is working, based on what we do, is two things. When you talk about people, process, technology, in the last 5 years, cheap money's been thrown at people, the hiring piece. Money's been thrown at technology. I mean, we saw this for the MarTech space. This is now obviously the sales tech space. We're ripe for consolidation. But and all of this isn't technology just for prospecting, but wow, for an SDR, BDR, an AE, whoever the person is in the sales org, it's a little overwhelming in terms of what is expected from them in terms of use of tech and the reporting of it, and the amount of money that we see going through our process on what companies are spending now on tech. And then we do an audit to see, well, who's actually using it and how are they using it? Wow. Wow. So the answer, at least one of them. Now, I don't think that sales leaders, and they don't necessarily want marketing to know this, I don't think they really understand what LinkedIn can do. I really don't think that they do. So, a couple of things. If they did, now Regan McGrath has become a good friend of mine. He's over at Broadcom, customer of ours. Talk about someone who knows how to be vulnerable. Wow, incredible individual. Now, if a sales leader understood LinkedIn, when we go into do engagements with customers, sales leaders and sellers and BDRs would not have profiles that are, I mean, I feel like I've gone back in time 10 years, resumes, CVs, right? All about me, my third, right in the third part. It's not about you. LinkedIn is about your community. It's about your target audience. It's about how you can help other people, right? So if sales leaders understood LinkedIn, then they would transition their own LinkedIn presence plus their go-to-market organization's presence to one where when a buyer looks at their profile, they're immediately, first of all, have that, wow, yes, I'm going to get some benefit from talking to this individual, number one. Number two is educate and inform and influence the person that looks at their profile, and then inform the person, well, if you want to go learn more, go click through to the specific parts of our website where you can go learn more, aka customer stories. Going back to what we just talked about, if an AE or an SDR or BDR does enough to even get the attention, imagine the email is crafted well enough to the buyer, and the buyer's like, actually, you call me at the right time. The message is pretty on point. I do have a need. Who sent me this? And then you click through to the person's profile. It's like, oh, you're a quota crusher. You're a barista 12 months ago, and I'm a CISO at an organization, and yeah, no, I don't think I'm going to chat. So problem number one in terms of what's work, the number one thing you got to do is sort out your go-to-market team's presence on the world's largest professional network. Because talk about outreach to conversion rate, you get people will respond if they're interested based on what value they perceive they're going to get from a conversation with you. And sadly, most people are not even thinking about this. And LinkedIn has been around since what, 2003? 20 years, but we still have LinkedIn CVs, resumes. So what's working? We fix that, number one. Gotta fix that, number one. When you do that, then you can start getting companies collaborating super effectively internally, because think about it, particularly for companies that are not a Broadcom. Think about smaller companies who have less brand recognition, but suddenly show up in the market. And their employees are on brand, on message, advocating for the organization, shouting from the rooftops about how fantastic the company is to work at from a cultural perspective, but not just posting about the company. You've got to be posting about industry topics that CISO in that bank would find relevant, right? So something that CISO might read and engage in every day. Now, just some data for you, Pam. Thank you for letting me use this. When you think about what's working, this is the opportunity that LinkedIn provides that companies are not executing against. So think about Pam's world at MEQ. For argument's sake, there are 300 companies that they would like to do more with or would like to acquire in 2024. And I'm simplifying it to make a point, right? We know the consensus purchase 6 to 10 people. Sometimes people say 20. We actually think it's 30 for enterprise selling, but let's just keep it simple. 3 people. So 900 human beings, not prospects. They are people, human beings, right? That we're trying to engage with. Now at MEQ, Pam, 180, 120 or so employees. And I'm lowballing this to make a point. Each employee on LinkedIn, let's say, has 500 connections. We all know that many people have way more than that. In LinkedIn and in Sales Navigator, which is a product that, by the way, most companies spend a fortune on it, but use about 5% of what it's capable of, you can map 60,000 relationships in this example to the 900 human beings. And if you've built your networks out in a programmatic way, so you've got your customers who are your biggest advocates, let's make sure your CRO and CMO are connected to all of your customers, right? And then map those people to your target audience, suddenly the go-to-market motion changes. Our knee-jerk reaction is not to throw someone into a sequence and annoy the heck out of your total addressable market for the next 2 years. The sequence becomes, what is the best path to that chief human resources officer? Okay, so Bob, who's not even in the sales organization, used to work at that firm. Oh, and he knows someone who works for the CHRO? Well, why don't I just go through that path instead, right? Anyone want to hazard a guess as to the conversion rate with that approach? Will, I'm going to ask you, Will Robinson.
20-30%.
Higher.
70.
Someone's
70. Okay.
Someone's seen the presentation somewhere before, but in all seriousness, why do we think that is? Well, think about that CHRO. He has already, or she has already, shut down all interest in emails and other forms of outreach from organizations. But suddenly that CHRO, she gets a call from Johnny, who used to work at the organization. And it goes something like this. Listen, I just had a message from a dear friend of mine. He works over at Numenta. It's a buyer experience organization. They see a massive opportunity for brand and brand alignment and talent acquisition, and done some due diligence on the annual report. It says in your annual report, you've got a challenge with this. Dan's done his due diligence. He's a great guy. He wants to have a conversation with you. He's put this video together for you so you can get a bit of a feel for what he's talking about. And by the way, here's a pre-read as well. I mean, that is what works. But boy, do you have to slow down to do that. And we've got to slow down, because more activity, more emails, more noise, more annoying the buyer. That's not the answer anymore. Got to slow down. Let me pause.
Hey, Dan, this is I think this is spot on. And you talked about SDR, BDR abuse. I had a client who was having some issues, and it turned out they outsourced LinkedIn. So they were using the executive profiles to go and connect with people, because to your point, they had the right persona, but it wasn't them behind it. And we're just starting to see a lot of abuse here as well. So the question is, how does an organization, what steps do they take to get their LinkedIn shop in order and stop this outsourcing madness that I'm starting to see much more prevalent?
Yeah. Don't do that if you're considering that. I'm sure no one on this call is. But I mean, think about the reputational risk as well of that. Oh, it just makes me feel uncomfortable. Got cold sweats now. So I think the step number one is, what a great opportunity for sales and marketing alignment off the bat is, let's go to market. Let's agree how we want to position the organization. I talked to a company yesterday, and they were going through a bit of a rethink as what they want to be when they grow up. Like they've got to solve that one voice strategy. They're working with an agency, and once that's done, let's decide how we want to show up on LinkedIn. We're talking background images, the elevator pitch, links through to the website, all of that. That's how you can collaborate, number one. Number two is, let's agree exactly what companies we're going after. So easier with ABM and maybe an enterprise play, but let's agree what companies we're targeting. And then let's take this, we call it relationship capital approach. Let's take that relationship capital approach. Let's use the tech we've already got. And then within Sales Navigator, there is a Team Link Extend bit of functionality that allows you to assign licenses to all employees within the organization. So make that part of a corporate initiative from the top. You're involved in the go-to-market. Everyone's in it. There's a way to do it. And then you can activate all employees, which allows you to map everyone's networks to your total addressable market and start leveraging each other for warm introductions. You can gamify it, you can incentivize folks for it, you can put screens up around the different offices if people are in the offices for who's done the most introductions to economic buyers. Or there's so many ways. I mean, that's what we do, that's what we teach, but there's so many ways to do it.
Yeah,
Dan, this is Michael Phelan. Let me build.
Hey, Michael,
on that
hold on one second. I think Mary Catherine has a question. Hey, Mary Catherine, I saw your hand up.
Yeah,
sorry, Michael.
Thank you. So my apologies. I'm going to take this conversation back a little bit because I don't know, maybe I haven't had enough coffee, but I wanted to ask you, Dan, in that last example around LinkedIn, who was making the contact to the prospect? Was that a customer, did you say? Or was that an employee in the company, like an executive?
Got you. So it could be anyone. Right, it could be a former customer, an existing customer, an employee, an investor. It could be anyone, but someone. It's the onus is on the salesperson, be it the account executive or the BDR, to do the work to then allow whoever's making the introduction to be able to do it. The person making the introduction doesn't have to do anything other than make a call or forward something along. And it's that transfer of trust that takes place. That was the example.
Yeah, I get the concept, but I'd like I'm in the tech space, and to get a customer to actually reach out to a prospect is very difficult. I find that they just, they have their own jobs to do with their own means of success. And I haven't seen a really good incentive program that really balances out that work that that you'd be asking them to do. But I completely agree. I'd rather hear from a customer than anybody else. But from a marketer perspective, that's that challenge. I feel like I'm not quite able to tip over to the other side.
Yeah, great point. And I should have been clearer. Thank you for calling that out. So when we teach the process, and also within the tech in Sales Navigator, we're asking a customer who has worked with the person that we're targeting before, right? So this functionality that exists to say, of these shared connections, 10 of them used to work together at Computer Associates. So I'm going to leverage a warm path through John, who worked with the person I'm targeting at Computer Associates 3 years ago. So the message looks something like, hey, it looks like you worked with the individual at Computer Associates 3 years. Did you keep in touch? Oh, yes, I did actually. Oh, well, fantastic. If I was to craft a message for you, would you be willing to forward it along? Yeah, sure, no problem at all. And so there's no real ask. There's no real lift for the person making the introduction other than just forwarding something along. There's nothing more than that. And it works so well because you think about these customers are meant to be, if they're happy customers, your biggest advocates.
Right. No, I think I get it on paper. I think it's harder to execute in reality. So
I would see. I mean, everybody's gonna, once this hits the street, everybody knows this is a sales pathway. So they're like, how do I get paid for introduction? Because mining social capital. Wow, that's like, social capital is the most rare thing we have. But if I went into an organization and said, hey, dump all your LinkedIn contacts because I want to mine them, there would be a little pushback. And, and if my head of engineering got a call saying, hey, your roommate's connected to somebody and our sales guy now wants to have a meeting with you so that you can I just, if you could do it, wow. But, there's a lot of things you need to be very thoughtful in managing this. So,
well, there is. And guess what? That's why Numentum exists as an organization, ladies and gentlemen.
This
there was a plant. You owe me a coffee.
Well, there's a check in the mail. Check in the mail.
Yes. This is Michael here. I like to build on this stream. This is actually one of the probably 30 different effective ways to get meetings. And there are a lot of ways, but this introduction, this kind of warm introduction is something that virtually no companies do. If you look at best practices, who does this best in the world? It is consulting companies. It is financial and audit companies. They live and breathe based on introductions. And if you look at a company like McKinsey, they bring it to a whole other level where they have an ecosystem of former McKinsey people, and they wine and dine and entertain and educate them much more so than just a LinkedIn introduction. They really think about all former employees as a way of doing this. I'll add one more thing to it too. Think about current employees, think about past employees. Also think about vendors. It's one we don't always think about. But if you take your top 30 vendors, you match them up to your list of target accounts, there you're going to actually have a reason for them to make an introduction. And what the sales leaders are not doing is the proactive work where you sit down with a vendor and say, hey, we're targeting these 7 accounts that you do business with. We'd like you to make an introduction. So you have to have some skin in the game for the person to make the introduction. But I think there are ways of putting more skin in the game. And the vendor one is an interesting one that we don't always think of. But if you don't do the proactive work to match them to your target accounts ahead of time, you're not going to get anything.
Nailed it. Yeah. And to add on to that as well, there's so many parts to this. I've tried to simplify it to get everyone to agree, right, that this would be nirvana. But there's so many parts to it because most people are not connected to the folks on LinkedIn that they actually should be, right? So most people, when it comes to salespeople, don't naturally think, okay, well, I've just spoken with 20 people at that organization to get this deal done. I've connected with every single one of them as I went through my process. And by the way, I've also nurtured them on an ongoing basis. So they've had, birthdays, they've moved around, they've heard from me, because LinkedIn allows you to do that if you take the time to do it. I've also been posting and educating them. Because we do that internally at Numentum, it's gotten to a point now where we can reach out to folks who we haven't had an engagement with for years. but they've heard from us, they've seen us, we've shown up in their feed, we've provided information, we've sent information through to them that we know would be relevant. So when we make an ask, guess what happens? Yeah, sure, I can introduce you, no problem at all. But that is a completely different motion and approach to what we're spending our time on at the moment, which is let's put as many people as possible into these sequences and blast them. We've got to just rethink the approach, you know. Pam, Rob, how are we on time?
Well, we're about 25 minutes out. We try to finish at 8:45.
Okay, perfect. Yep. What about this one? Sales leaders don't know how to leverage content. Now, a couple of things for you. Actually, let me frame this up a little bit before we jump into the examples. So I worked at a couple of different companies where I would sit in meetings and I would hear sales leaders come in and blame marketing for not having enough good content. Not even sure what that means. And then the sales leader would say, you need to get more stuff that we can use. And then the marketing leader would say something along the lines of, okay, great. What do we need? Well, case studies. Okay, well, didn't you sell the customer? Yes. Well, why don't you go talk to them about doing a case study for us? Well, that's your job. Well, it's our job to pull it all together, but it's your relationship. So why don't we go execute this? I mean, it's those kind of nonsensical conversations that I was sat in just watching with wide eyes. But it's there's two other things that I would challenge sales leaders on, and I'm just having some fun because I am one. Number one is, if sales leaders knew how to use content effectively, then they would have their people leverage content one-to-many as part of their operating rhythm. So they would be telling their sales leaders, connect with all the people you're selling to, right? And then start posting to LinkedIn. You don't have to post a ton of stuff, but post on a regular cadence, because these are the very people you're trying to sell to. And guess what? The algorithm in LinkedIn, for about 10 days after you connect with someone, prioritizes your content and your posts into their feeds. So by not posting, it's literally like saying to the prospect, I'm not going to do anything to help you over the next 10 days. I'm not going to nurture you. I'm not going to send you anything. I'm literally going to ignore you, right? That's the equivalent of not posting. Now, thank you again, Pam. When we looked at the data for MeQ, only 1 out of 4 people in the sales, biz dev, customer success support, and marketing teams had posted anything on LinkedIn in the last 30 days. What a massive missed opportunity for the very folks who are meant to be selling to, developing business relationships with, caring for, and marketing to the folks that you want to have as customers. So Pam, again, thank you for being vulnerable, but this is not anything different to what we see when we pull the numbers for Vodafone, or Verizon, or American Express. It's the same. So if sales leaders knew the power of content for one-to-many, this would be part of the go-to-market plan. The other part of it would be when you engage someone on LinkedIn, and you get that conversation off LinkedIn as quickly as possible to have business conversations, but you maintain it because you've got them on multiple channels. Then you've got them live on a process, you're going to speak again in a week, but you can chat with them on LinkedIn for stuff that you might need them for and get some guidance as you go through the cycle. But you can also send them material. Now, we've got to think of all the content matrix. I'm a complete, and I've asked everyone I've ever sold to ever across all the different sectors, when I'm trying to nurture you, what kind of stuff do you need? When do you need it? And what kind of asset? And I mapped this out. It's about 6,500 people. And it's pretty, you can see what they need and what they want based on personas. I mean, it's pretty easy to map out, but boy, that was a geeky process to go through. But sales leaders don't know what buyers want at different stages. Most of us do, or we've read or we've heard it, but they don't, and they don't think it's important, or they don't see it's important enough to send material that's going to benefit the buyer off cycle, not just when you're on a call with a potential buyer, but off cycle. And just a note that says, by the way, you're probably thinking about this at the moment. So I'm going to send you this. Just, let me know your thoughts when you get a chance. Completely off cycle, but it's exactly the right asset at exactly the right time. And it differentiates you from all the other types of salespeople who are trying to engage you. I'll go to that one, last one in a moment. I see Will nodding furiously, but anyone got any thoughts on the use of content one-to-many and one-to-one?
I think you're spot on. It continues to surprise me how much good content might get put together, or it's put together based upon the issues identified in the go-to-market strategy, and yet they just are like, oh, I don't like this, so I'm not going to use it, forgetting that they're not the target audience. So I would say hooray. Like, absolutely, it's sad that this is like 20 years in the making and it's still happening.
Yeah.
Well, and I would also argue that, we're a lot of customers are way farther down in the funnel these days because, information is a lot more available. And so the traditional, top of the funnel is evolved. So, I don't think a lot of salespeople really understand the complete buying process. I think to an earlier comment, they focus on the close and then, hey, we're freemium. So, I forget about all that other stuff and I just focus on the absolute dollars. And to your point, the off cycle to me is where all the magic happens these days.
Yeah. And it's that relationship building, like LinkedIn, I don't know whether they still have this, but they call it relationships matter. And that's something just stuck with me from my days there. And it's nurturing people when they're not even in a buying cycle. Like our target audience are CEOs, everyone on this call is CEOs, CROs, CMOs, and the people that work directly for them. Now, we're constantly sending material out to them one-to-one, not mass sending, one-to-one. Will, I was thinking of you the other day and thought you might find this interesting, hope all is well. Nothing more than that, but it's the right content. And boy, do you stay front of mind with folks. But again, different motion.
Yeah, I want to take a contrarian approach here. I agree with number 4. And having been both a head of sales and a head of marketing, and I'm going to offend some people here, but a lot of marketing content isn't very good. It's not getting to the core issue. It's not really expressing the value proposition. It's just gloss. And I think the challenge for all marketers on the call is, go to the edge. Do something that people are going to read, not the usual, bullet point. This is why we're better. Come on, we've all seen it. So I think people are tuning out. And the second thing, one of the things that I see a lot is sales enablement. Oftentimes does a really, they talk about the sales process, but a lot of sales enablement doesn't talk about the tools, like the great content that exists and when they should leverage it. So that, some of the observations, Dan, I'd love your feedback on that.
I think going to the edge is brilliant. It reminds me of a conversation I had with head of sales ops last week, who's a dear friend of mine. And he said, we've got this pitch deck. It's probably 60 slides long. And obviously we don't use the 60 slides, but people pick and choose the ones they want. The bit that differentiates our organization from everything else in the market is one bullet point on slide 47 or something right at the bottom. And that's the reason people buy. And I was like, great, what did you do about that? Nothing in particular. Okay, well, go back with that nugget, get your sales and marketing team to meet with the person who provided that nugget, and then go super deep into that. And that becomes your case study on that. Blow it up. Like, that is why people are buying from you. But yes, is that there's a lot of noise on LinkedIn and noise in marketing content generally. But let's go find out why the customers that we do have bought and why they are renewing and why they picked us and why they didn't pick other organizations. Let's go and find that out. But what happens, in my opinion, is that the salesperson closes the deal and gets the commission and throws it over to the customer success person if it is tech that needs to be implemented. oftentimes doesn't even transfer the notes and the reasons why the organization bought. And then the first conversation that the customer success person has with the buyer is, so tell me why you bought. It's like, what? So there's so many broken things in that. But it all comes back to, in my opinion, sales taking more ownership of the activity that they're doing and bringing marketing, support, product to the people that bought to find out why they bought, and let's take that material and let's create great content off the back of it.
Dan, this is Michael. Let me build a little bit on your comment about curating for your network. If you look at salespeople are the ones that have the network on LinkedIn, right? And traditionally, sales has always thought marketing are the publishers. They're the ones that post on the networks. They do that job. But I think we need to change the mindset for sales and say, you need to curate for your network. You need to share best practices. And a lot of salespeople, the only thing they share is the company stuff, right?
Yeah.
They don't share, the buyer insight stuff. They don't share the peer best practices stuff. They don't go to sessions and grab content and so forth. So we've got to empower them to do that and teach them how to do that. In the simplest way ever, they got to help their buyer be a better buyer. So, every day they've got to help their network get better, right, at what they do. But a lot of salespeople, they don't view that they have a role on curating and publishing. So I think it's giving them content, giving them training, kind of talking to them about the idea. But I think it should happen through the sales team are the ones that really should be doing this.
I love that. And the other thing with salespeople, because I am one, is they have to know what's in it for them, and how we tell them that this is important. Yes, it's important for the buyer, absolutely. But how is this going to help you make more money? How is this going to help you close more deals? How is this going to help you have a more robust network that you can leverage relationship selling and warm introductions? I hear you. I'm going to bring it home with the last one. Just conscious of time and I want to give time for the folks to wrap. But because for so long, sales leaders, and I am guilty of it, I was laying on the beach this summer, not in my Speedos. I am English, but I don't wear Speedos, if that's what you're thinking. And I was trying to relax, and my brain just constantly going. And maybe that's part of who I am and how I'm wired, but I think a lot of sales leaders and marketing leaders in general were always thinking about, and I think as an industry, we've got to, not just sales, we've got to slow down and just take a step back and challenge each other. It's like, what are we actually trying to do here? Just because we've been doing this, does it make sense to carry that on? Did it work? Let's look at the data. Guess what? No, it didn't. Is there a better way? We've got to think about that. And I think activity for sales leaders in particular has become a bit of a comfort blanket. I worked at an organization where the sales leader I had at the time would walk onto the floor. It was before the pandemic, obviously, would walk onto the floor, and people would be doing what I taught them, which is do your research. First of all, slow down. Just because everyone in the organization is doing crazy stuff, you're in my organization. I'll shield you. Do what I'm getting you to do, which is to slow down, identify the people you want to engage with, do your corporate research, do your personal research. And guess what? That's quiet time. That's headphones on. That's focusing. That's getting the information. And then let's look at the best paths in and let's go. My region in the East at Sprinkler, I'm just going to say it because it's pretty obvious where it was at. We were the number one region every single quarter I was there for 3 years, pretty much 12 quarters, because of the approach that we took. But the sales leader would come onto the shop floor and be like, why is it so quiet in here? Why is it so quiet? This is ridiculous. Like, get on the phones. It's like, I kept taking to one side. Okay, you got to stop doing that. All right. You want the number one region to maintain the number? You let me run my show. Let me do my thing. But they're not comfortable slowing down. And I think we're at this tipping point in the market where, particularly for enterprise selling, we're now shifting to quality over quantity. We've got to stop the madness, because you think about particularly enterprise selling and ABM, take an organization that's selling into, I used the example of a CISO earlier on, right? Within the security organization, maybe they've got 20 people that work for them in a big bank. And then each of those teams of 20 leaders have like 5 people in them. And maybe you've got 5 companies in your patch. There's about 200 people that really you need to engage to have a successful year. If you can have good conversations, that's 200 people. Like, that's not a lot of folks to engage. So let's slow down to engage them in the way that they want to be engaged. And that means changing everything from how we think about the approach, metrics, compensation, leadership, coaching, one-on-ones, team meetings, getting everyone behind the org. I mean, it's time to rip the Band-Aid off and start thinking very differently. Otherwise, companies are going to fail. They're going to run out of cash. Investors are going to get fed up. They're going to ditch them. Employees will get fed up. They're going to leave companies. Like, we're about to see the dam burst, and that's why we do what we do.
So who's doing this right? Because, my takeaway is sales is broken. They don't know what's happening and they need help.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to slow down.
So the types of companies are, think of companies, the publicly traded ones. We've worked with and continue to SAP, Broadcom Software, Verizon Business, American Express, Global Business Travel, big companies who realize they're not going to fix it overnight, but realize because of leadership that to sustain the momentum for the next 5 years, something needs to change. Now, they're not just suddenly stopping everything, right, and putting these kind of motions in place, but they're beginning to introduce this kind of approach into the organization, seeing the results. Like Vodafone Business, just to give you a data point from this approach, their enterprise function with about 400 sellers around the world, $500 million of incremental pipeline in 5 months with a 25% close rate, right? So, and that's just with one part of an organization. So you can imagine off the back of those kind of numbers, things start moving a little bit quicker in terms of transformation. And for smaller companies, it's sometimes it's awareness, first of all, right? Some of the smaller companies are just like, this is who we are, and we're a company, and you should know about us. That's half the battle, right? But getting your message out to market is not just, as we talked about, marketing's responsibility. When you've got a small but mighty crew of, let's say, 100 people, 50 people, every one of you needs to be getting out there, not just the sales team, the executives. We look at some of the data, and like 1 out of 10 execs have posted anything on LinkedIn in the last 30 days. I mean, that is a travesty, So who's doing it well? Some very big publicly traded companies, some late stage funded organizations who are trying to desperately have those 8 quarters of successive growth to achieve an IPO or whatever it might be. And I mean, listen, all of our customers are on our website. You can go check them out so you can see who we work with. But it's a new approach. Side note, we rebranded from Empire Selling to Numentum in May, and our agencies that we partnered with were talking to all of our customers, and the customers were saying, what you're doing, it's not just about empowering the sales org, it's about getting the entire company to think differently about how we want to engage the buyer. It's a completely different approach. Everyone is involved. Everyone plays a role.
Dan, I shared the link to Hootsuite's study on the LinkedIn algorithm.
Yeah.
I'm curious your insider opinion on those breakdowns of how the algorithm changes. I think we can all see the changes, but it's amazing how many companies just plow on with old tactics that don't work anymore. Any thoughts on this?
I do, and I actually haven't read this blog, so I'm going to. Thank you. The algorithm is the algorithm. It will continue to change based on whatever's in this. LinkedIn will make their changes and not tell us, and we'll have to figure it out, and then Hootsuite or whoever will do something. I think it comes back to when we post, why are we doing it? And when we understand that, then you start thinking about more of a blended approach. So for example, if I'm trying to win the hearts and minds of the HR community, about 50% of what I post is going to be content that my corporate channel or my marketing organization has produced, and I'm going to carefully think what I want to put out. But about 50% will be that. About 25% will be me reading the kind of things like chro.com, if that's even a thing, but the kind of things that they would read themselves and start positioning myself as a fountain of knowledge, right, for them. And then the final 25%, I kind of call it the human content. So I do post things about my family and my kids and funny stuff that they've done because it humanizes me to my buyers. And there may be a post that may not be of me with great green nail polish on my toes that's going out this afternoon. That's happening. But it's kind of humanizes me, right? But it's also about the kind of things I'm interested in. I'm kind of joking about that because that is something I do, but it's more about the human stuff. It's I'm very interested in helping military veterans transition out of the military into civilian life. I'm really big on mental health because I've struggled with mental health for 20 years. I've been in therapy for 20 years. So I talk a lot about mental health, particularly for men. So when you start putting that kind of personal content out, you humanize yourself to your market. So you're educating them, you're influencing them, you're bringing value to them, and you're being human. And guess what? People buy from people. So there's a strategy in place. So coming back to the algorithm, yeah, let's work the algorithm, but it's also more importantly, I think, let's think about what we want to use the channel for. And you will see a picture of myself with my nails. And by the way, my 5-year-old paints my nails, which she loves doing. And she's got this new nail polish, which we found out last night, glows in the dark, which was fascinating when I woke up from napping with my 8-year-old and looked at my toes and I was like, what the? So there you go.
So Dan, we're probably getting close to the end of our time together. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for bringing so much excitement. Thank you for putting your contact information up. Everybody can kind of look at that and jot that down while we wrap up the session today. This topic of sales and marketing alignment never gets old. I know this group could stay on until lunchtime talking about this, but we've had yet another Sammy classic. I know everybody will be thinking about it. I made a whole bunch of notes and you and I have talked already a bunch, but I always think of new things when I speak to you. So thanks to all of you for joining. Please do reach out to and follow Dan and connect with him on LinkedIn and elsewhere and have a chat. This recording will be available soon in the meetup group. You'll get an alert about that and feel free to share it with others. Just again, a quick reminder of our upcoming programming. October 5th, in-person joint session of Congress with Any Excuse. And there's a lot of overlap between this group and Any Excuse. So super excited to have you guys there. And then November 15th, the virtual session with Sarah Fay. And that session is open for registration. We will be announcing it later in the week. But I think I have the link here. Yes, this is the link here. If you want to click right on through, we'll be talking about AI, which is, again, one of the other hottest topics in marketing and sales. And Rob, I'll just turn it over to you, see if you've got any questions or comments, final comments, and Dan will give you the last word after that.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. I think, like everything else, a timely topic. Dan, you, aside from green glow in the dark toenails, you hit some other sensitive topics. And it's our peril if we don't pay attention to it. But we're dealing with an age-old issue, and it sounds like the Momentum approach is making some strides. So we've had a lot of questions along the way. The questions have been great, and would like any closing thoughts on your end. And Dan, if you could stick around after the call with Pam and me, that would be great. So any closing thoughts for the folks who are here?
Yeah, closing thoughts to the folks here, but also anyone who watches this recording is we at our core, we just want to help. That's it. So we have conversations with folks who may never buy from us, right? But we also learn in the process. So let's connect on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message. We'd love to do that. And I just appreciate folks who want to get vulnerable. And none of us have all the answers, right? No one does. So the more we can chat, the more we can collaborate and share, the better we'll all be. So I just appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic day, and hopefully we'll see you in October, and then again on November 15th.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yep.